Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make homemade donuts. Hey everyone, it's Sam here, and today I'm sharing my favorite recipe for homemade yeast-raised donuts. Now, as far as yeast recipes go, this is a fairly simple recipe, and I think you're really going to love it. Now, to get started, you are going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now, you're actually going to need a lot more flour than this for this recipe. You'll need about 3.5 cups total, but for starters, we're just going to be using 2 cups. We're going to add this into the bowl of our stand mixer. Along with the flour, we're going to add 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 2.5 teaspoons of instant yeast, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Stir these ingredients together until they're well combined. Once you have your dry ingredients combined, you are going to need 2/3 cup of whole milk and 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Now we are going to melt these together. You can do this in either a saucepan on the stovetop over medium-low heat, or you can do it in a microwave. The important thing is that you melt these together and you heat them to 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, I'm just going to be melting them together in the microwave. I'm going to be using a quick read thermometer to make sure the temperature is right, and you definitely want to make sure that you're stirring the mixture pretty frequently. That way you're not just hitting a pocket of particularly warm or particularly cool milk and butter. This is a little too hot, so I'm going to give it a couple minutes, check the temperature again, and then once it finally is between 110 and 115, we can go ahead and add it into our flour mixture. The next thing you'll need is 2 large eggs, and I recommend using room temperature eggs. It's just going to help your ingredients combine a little bit better since we're going to be adding them to a mixture that's already going to be a little bit warm. Now, along with the eggs, I like to add a little bit of vanilla extract. I'm just going to be adding 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. This is optional, but I love the flavor it adds. I'm going to combine the eggs and the vanilla. Now turn your mixer speed to low, and we're going to add these eggs into the mixture, and we're going to stir until everything is nicely combined. Now here I like to switch over to using my dough hook rather than using my paddle attachment. So I'm just going to swap that out. Go ahead and give the bowl a nice scrape while I'm at it. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the recipe, we started with flour, but it wasn't all that you need for these donuts. We have another 1.5 cups that we are going to gradually add with our mixer on low speed, and we'll add this now. I just want to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl because my dough hook is having some trouble reaching the flour on the sides. Now, when working with yeast, I've found that the amount of flour you need to add is never really an exact science, which can be a little bit frustrating. Rather than saying you need 3.5 cups of flour and that's that, I like to use a little bit less flour, and then we add as much as needed until we get a dough that's the proper consistency. So for us, what that's going to look like is a dough that is smooth, a little bit elastic, a little bit tacky to the touch. This right here is still too wet. So what we're going to do is we are going to add additional flour a little bit at a time with our mixer on low speed until we get the consistency we're looking for. Now what this should look like is your dough should be pulling away from the sides of the bowl. It should be forming a ball, and as I mentioned, it should be tacky to the touch. Generally, when I'm making these donuts, I find that I need to often add another 3 to 4 tablespoons of flour, but that can vary depending on your own kitchen. So here we have a nice soft ball of dough. It's pulling away from the sides, and it's a little bit tacky to the touch without sticking to my fingers. We're in a pretty good place right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this dough into a lightly oiled bowl. Cover the bowl with plastic wrap, and then we're going to let this sit in a warm place until the dough has doubled in size. For me, this usually takes about 30 minutes, but it can depend on the temperature of your kitchen. One thing I like to do is I like to turn my oven on and then put this on top of my oven on my stovetop where it gets a little bit warmer. Once your dough is risen, we're gonna go ahead and turn this out onto a clean, lightly floured surface. Lightly dust your donut dough, and we're going to just roll this out to be about a ½ inch thick. Now use a donut cutter, or in my case, 2 cookie cutters, to cut out as many donuts as you can from the dough. You want to keep your cuts as close together as possible because you are going to want to take any scraps and regroup them to make more donuts, but every time you do that, your donuts are going to get a little bit messier looking. So as many cuts as possible out of the first roll. I like to keep the donut holes that I cut out and use them as donut holes, just cook them that way. But if you don't want to do that, you can regroup them into the other donut holes in the scraps, re-roll it out, and cut out more donuts that way. We'll transfer these donuts over to a wax paper lined baking sheet. Now, ideally, once you have all of your donuts on your baking sheet, you would cover them with plastic wrap, let them sit in a warm spot until they've puffed up while you are heating your oil. Turns out I don't have any plastic wrap in my pantry right now, so we're just going to cover them with a clean towel. While our donuts are rising, we're going to want to start heating our oil. It's going to take some time for the oil to get to the temperature we need. Now you're going to want to use a medium-sized, heavy-bottomed saucepan, and you're going to want to fit it with a frying thermometer or a candy thermometer. Make sure that your thermometer is not touching the bottom of the saucepan. We're going to go ahead and take this over to our stovetop. We'll fill this saucepan about 2 inches deep with vegetable oil and turn our heat to medium or just below medium. We're going to want to heat this oil until it reaches 355 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't crank up the heat to speed up the process, or you're going to end up burning your donuts. Now, 355, or rather 350 to 355 degrees Fahrenheit is the sweet spot for making these donuts. If your temperature is too low, they're going to end up greasy and undercooked. If the temperature is too high, they're going to end up burned on the outside and undercooked or raw in the middle. You definitely don't want that. Take your time, let the oil heat slowly, and besides, our donuts need to be rising at this point anyway. Once your oil has reached temperature and your donuts have risen, we are going to carefully lower them one at a time into the oil. Now these donuts are going to need to cook for about 45 seconds on each side. You want them to just be a light golden brown. I always recommend doing just one donut at a time, because then after you do that first donut, we can cut into it and make sure it's not raw in the center, make sure it's cooked properly, and then we can adjust for the rest of our donuts. Now, after you cook one of your donuts, the temperature of your oil is going to drop. Wait for it to get back up to 355 degrees Fahrenheit before cooking your next donut. So I'm placing my donuts on a baking sheet that's lined with paper towels, lots of paper towels, and it has a cooling rack on it. I'm going to just let some of the oil drain off for a couple seconds, and then I'm going to carefully take this donut and I'm going to dip it in granulated sugar. Powdered sugar would work too, though. You'll just want to let your donut cool a little bit longer so it doesn't melt. I want to get both sides covered in sugar and return that to the cooling rack, where I'm going to let it cool completely. Today I'm just doing granulated sugar for my donut coating, but granulated sugar and cinnamon mixed together would be great, or I also have a very simple, delicious butter glaze recipe on the blog that I'll include below that is also great on these donuts. While I recommend letting the donuts cool completely so that you don't burn yourself, I can never wait that long. I let them cool down just enough so I don't burn my fingertips, and then that's when I dig in. And that is how to make homemade yeast-raised donuts. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe, and if you try it out, please let me know what you think. As you know, I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. That's good.